Hi, everybody. We're back. This is part two of my chat with Zoe. And we finished part one talking about Zoe's writing. As I say, she is an author in her own right. I have her books. And she was telling us a little bit about the first book she wrote. So, Zoe, can we go back to that just to connect us up again?
Yeah. So my first book, you can see that, it's very psychedelic. A Thousand Miles from Nowhere. So it was kind of seen as a kind of hippie trip of self-discovery. And I always said it's about 70, 80%
Yeah.
autobiographical,
Yeah.
not necessarily chronological order. All names and places were changed. But yeah, so it was more about what happened in my late teen years and my how do I put this? Yeah, my trips of self-discovery,
Mhm.
experimenting with psychedelic drugs, a little bit of travel, um, up until when I had my first daughter and one of my first real loves, and then he left my life and came back into my life 10 years later whilst I was actually writing the book, and I'd had no idea that he was even alive or dead. So that was all real. It was quite an experience. But
Yeah.
yes, a very different type of book. I brought that out, I think it's 2013 and then 2016. I did two different editions
Okay.
and self-published, and it was only ever available on Amazon. These are things that I want to rectify with
Mm.
the book that I will talk about next, and another
Mm.
book that I brought up because I don't want to just have it on Amazon. But I said it was all self-published, and I had to go the easiest, most economical
Yes.
way of doing things.
Yes.
Uh, and then my 2020 book, which we'll discuss now, which led me into also your book, Memories of Lockdown. I can't remember if that's when we first started speaking in 2020. I'm not entirely sure, or if it
Yes.
was before.
Yeah. I think it was probably about then, Zoe. I think it was probably about then, and which is what led me to contact you when I decided to start collecting stories in 2021. So
Okay.
I'd like to ask you why, because I was absolutely thrilled when you said you would contribute to my first book, and you've continued writing, and it's been absolutely wonderful. Because not only is it lovely for me when I receive your stories, it's always so exciting, but the relationship that, for example, we've built up over the years, and it's just that's been one of the most enjoyable things for me, getting to know my writers. And of course, this is even more so. There are things that I'm learning about you today, and also similarities that we have in our interests and the way we've done things, self-publishing, having to go through Amazon, now not wanting to, finding other routes, lots of little similarities. So can I leave you to talk in whichever order you wish about your book, and then how it's sort of connected to the thought of wanting to have the connection with my first book.
Okay. Well, after my first book, I continued writing,
Yeah.
mainly articles. I started another book, which was actually going to be about my father's life, as he had a very, very interesting life. This was quite a few years before he actually passed. He passed in 2021.
Yes.
And, but I never finished any. So I had these various things going on, projects. And then 2020 hit. And I had left Spain in early 2020 with my youngest daughter, Yasmin, to go back to the UK for various reasons for her, but also for me. I kind of was burnt out with Spain, wanted new beginnings, thought I'd have a better chance at work over there. But I'd already had an inkling that something was coming, something
Yeah.
big on a deep intuitive level. I mean, for a few
Yeah.
years now, it was. And my mother, like a few people remember me saying this back in 2017 when I felt a big wave of something was coming. I was having strange dreams and I didn't know what it was. And towards the end of 2019, I said to my mother, if you're going to sell your apartment, I feel that you should do it now. I feel you have to do it before 2020. I don't know why, but I feel something's coming.
Mm.
And within the month, it was sold. And this was December. So we left in January. First, we went to stay with a friend in Shropshire. And then we went on to see my sister in Dubai for a month before she had her second daughter. Then the plan was to go back to the UK and look for work and anyway, so it was while we were in Dubai that everything started happening in the February. And it all happened very quickly. And I kept saying to my sister, I feel this is so big, something that's going to change our lives forever. I was just having, it's very hard to put into words, but people have different ideas about downloads and channeling. But she remembers clearly as well. I stood in her house and I started shaking and crying. This was before the lockdowns came. And I said, I just got the most terrible premonition that something awful is coming and it's going to change our lives forever. And I don't know what it is. I can't put it into words, but
Mm.
it just feels dreadful. But it's not going to be what they're telling us that it is. And she's never forgotten that either. And then literally, it was like within days, it was bang, bang, bang. And I said, my brother-in-law, my ex-brother-in-law, he's Lebanese and obviously speaks Arabic. So he was getting news that the rest of the world also weren't getting about that area. And he said to me, listen, they're locking down countries secretly. And, we had to talk about us getting out of there before
Yes.
our return.
Yes.
Happened literally like overnight. When I said to people, I think they're going to lock down the Middle East, they're going to lock down Dubai. People, oh no, they never lock down the airspace in Dubai. Dubai, like we see what's happening now.
Yes.
And I said, this isn't like anything we've ever experienced. And literally within 24 hours, it all started. And we got the last two seats on a plane leaving on Turkish Airlines, and it was like a film script. People like fisticuffs in the airport, all fighting over the seats, and a lot of people hadn't even been told that they were shutting down the airspace. You see,
Mm.
and so we got out on this last flight, and then we got stuck in the UK in the airport, in a hotel at the airport at Gatwick for some days because we couldn't go to my friends in Shropshire for various reasons and didn't have anywhere to go in that moment. And we couldn't just get back into Spain because Spain had just locked down and nobody was clear about the rules and regulations. So we just were in this absolute turmoil. And I was really sick. My daughter had just been really sick.
Oh, so.
So horrendous. So I actually started writing at the airport and about our experiences and adventures and everything I'd heard and seen in Dubai, because I already, through various sources, had some inkling that, this wasn't what we were being told.
Yeah.
And even a doctor who was a very awake, who attended to us in Dubai, said, listen, I can't tell you more. She said, but they're going to lock down the countries. And she told us what to take. She was talking about huge amounts of vitamin C, vitamin D3, various things long before it became more mainstream. She said, but you need to leave.
Yeah.
And this was before they officially announced what was
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah.
So anyway, we were stuck there. So I started writing to keep myself sane. And then we actually managed to get on a flight out of the UK back to Spain. As we were Spanish residents, we were allowed in. And I've never
Yes.
forgotten the biggest flight of our lives. There was only 10 of us on this, I think it was a BA flight.
Mm.
And everyone was sitting there silently in masks. No one was talking to each other. No one was going near. And we got to Alicante, and it was almost quite funny, quite refreshing, because they didn't even look at our passports. They just said, oh, yeah,
Oh,
come through, because I'd heard that other people had
yeah.
big issues of all over the world.
Yeah.
They wouldn't let people through. So we got on this bus to Benidorm. And again, there was only like literally a handful because nobody was obviously out. And my father came to collect us. I'll have to show you the photo one day. He turned up looking like a terrorist. He had his Palestinian flag round here. He had marigold gloves. He looked like an insane terrorist anyway. And he was like, get your stuff in the car, get it. And he was like really panicking because
Yeah.
obviously nobody really knew what was going on. And then he literally dropped us at my daughter's, like threw out the suitcases. It's bye, straight into lockdown.
Mm.
And unfortunately, as you know, like in Spain, it was very severe lockdown, far worse at that part. I mean, I know later on other countries got it very badly, but we weren't allowed to exercise, we weren't allowed out. And my daughter's apartment, there was three of us, me and both my daughters and our five cats, and no views. And it's not like the same having a garden or being out in the camp or on the mountain. And it was horrific.
Yeah.
And that's when I had quite a bad, I'd say like a mental breakdown in the end, because I clearly perceived that there was something very, very ominous going on.
Mm.
And I remember kind of standing on the street and just going, if this is this what they're talking about, this deadly, deadly pandemic where everyone's dropping dead. Why don't I know anyone? Because at this stage, I didn't know anyone who'd really got sick. That happened later in 2021. There was far more. But I remember my feeling wasn't even, oh, what is this? It was, oh no, this is happening again, as if I'd already lived through it. It was a very bizarre feeling, as if I'd already lived through this either in a previous existence or had some kind of.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so at that stage, I was very alone because most people weren't on my wavelength that I knew. And I just resisted all the way through. I just felt something was very badly wrong. I started my research, and I've always been a researcher, but this I took to the next level. So I shut away. My daughters were very worried about my mental health, understandably so, because I was literally night and day. And I managed to come across like data that stage hadn't been released. I found I was deep diving into everything, the Pentagon, WikiLeaks. My computer literally exploded in the end because of WikiLeaks. I
Mm.
lost all my research, but I was investigating the 5G around the world. I was in the mafia, where radiation leaks, you name it. I mean, I was literally 24/7. My brain was exploding. And I came across some things that were potentially dangerous for me. And yeah, but I started writing my book. So I wrote it about how me and my daughter were traveling. So I made it into more of a fictional book because I felt
Yeah.
the coming across would blow most people's brains. They would not get it.
Yeah.
It was way too much. Now, of course, but back then there weren't many people on that wavelength, and I started to make contact with people around the world on similar wavelengths. I made some good friends in America who have their own channel, who now I speak to every month, who have been awake for years and years, and he was involved in some form. I don't know, with the American government, whatever. But he was very we were very much on the same wavelength, and they were telling me what was going on over there. And at this stage, my friends were starting to kind of come on board with me when I kept saying, I'm not going to go out and applaud. They every day everyone was applauding. And I said, I'm not. It's not because I don't think that they're doing an amazing job. I said, but they do anyway. I said, I feel like I'm in the Fourth Reich here. I feel like there's something so dark going on. It's like everybody's robotic, and I'm not. There's something that's just not at all right. And then slowly people started questioning, going, "There's something not right." And then the rules and regulations, as you know, made no sense over here. And
Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
I wrote and wrote and wrote and finally had like, so you can see how thick my book is.
Mm.
So when times to still, and just about everything you can put, well, you've read it, Roseanne, so you
I
know,
have.
like I covered everything possible from the Galactic Federation to the CIA to
Yes.
CERN to the mafia to terrorism to
Yes.
it's like
It's
my
it's all
brain
in there. It's all in there.
exploded.
And
And
also just to say, Zoe, anybody listening to us now, who
yeah.
would like to buy a copy of any of your books, are they still available on Amazon at the moment?
It is 2020 when time stood still,
Yeah.
and my pseudonym on this one is Skye Coelho, is on Amazon still as a
Yeah.
paperback
Yeah.
and an ebook,
Mm.
and then
Very,
I'll be
very interesting.
because there's some things that I want to change that aren't so relevant now because at the time, well, it is relevant, but I dedicated this to my cousin, as you know, who was sadly also murdered in 2020. So it was a horrific year on every level.
Yes.
And at the time, the trial hadn't gone ahead, and they were doing some crowdfunding. So there's some things in there just like that I do want to change to bring up to date. But the actual story is exactly the
Yeah.
same.
It's fascinating. And it's fascinating for me listening to you, going back to the beginning of your story, February, beginning of March in 2020, when you were in
Mm.
Dubai and then you knew you had to get out, your journey out. Because my story there, again, there is a similarity. I was in England and I didn't know what to do. To cut a long story short, we decided, me, my daughter, the children, her children, we decided to go back from England because I'd been in England looking after my parents at that time. So when the lockdown happened, Mum had actually died in the November 2019. Dad was on his own, and I was going in to see him every day. Suddenly, I couldn't go in to see him every day, so there was no particular reason for me to stay in England until I could visit him again. Anyway, fast forward, we decided to get flights, and we got one of the last flights out of Gatwick Airport in England to Alicante. And exactly as you said, it was so eerie and so eerily quiet through the airport, sitting with just a dozen other people in the departure lounge, masks
Yeah,
on, heads
yeah,
down, nobody
yeah,
communicating on a normal sized aircraft with just a dozen other people on it. Then we got into Alicante, and I was expecting to be grilled and really everything looked at so carefully, and they hardly bothered to look at our passports. Just oof, on you go, and on we went. And it's exactly the same experience. So
yeah,
when you look back, there were so many of us in different places in the world, all
mm,
making decisions of where we felt we needed to be, given the
yeah,
circumstances at face value, because none of us really knew what was going on at that time. Not really knew. We just knew we had to make decisions to move around. So anyway,
yeah,
going back to you, the books are available on Amazon, and there you were, your 2020 when time stood still. Fantastic.
yeah.
A great achievement. Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
I feel in many ways, having started off with my book one in 2021, I naively thought at that stage that a trilogy covering, being published 21,
Mm,
22 by 2023, I thought, oh, by then it will all be over because I didn't have all your premonitions. I didn't know any of those things. Thought it will all be
mm,
over by then. So we'll do a trilogy. It'll tell us the story of this time, and then we'll get on with our lives again. And here we are in
mm.
2026. Hmm.
We've got a long way to go.
We've got a long way to go. So, where do
Well,
you want to go from there? Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about your writing? Are you still writing, or what happened then?
so so then you contacted me to contribute to your book, and then you know that during that period, a friend and I were leading the local protests about the lockdown,
Yes.
and so that became a very interesting period for me in 2021. Obviously, things then got a lot worse because that's when my father also passed or was in hospital
Yes.
here, and we weren't allowed to be with him, which was everything I'd written about. And when I talked about premonitions, then I lived firsthand with my own family, and it was a horror story.
Horrible.
But
Horrible.
before that, I'm doing these protests, and
So,
that
Zoe,
was a
just
very
just to interrupt you for a second, just to pull everybody back into it, the protests you were doing, was that in your local area? Was it in Valencia, Alicante?
well. First, it was just in our local area,
Mm.
but we were involved with groups worldwide, and of course all across Spain, as well as I said other countries. And then I went to Madrid. It would have been, yeah, it was actually in March. That's right. It was just before my father became ill. So
Mm.
I went to Madrid for the worldwide protest. They were simultaneously across the globe in all the major cities. So I went to represent our group,
Yeah.
and I interviewed, oh gosh, no, I can't remember. She was a famous activist at the time. This lady in Madrid. We were together there, and then we had to hide from the police because they were all raining down with their horses and the batons. It all got a bit out of control.
Yeah.
And then I had a very interesting experience when I came across. I talked about this. I think I already talked to you about this about the Chinese man who approached me and wanted to feed me information and get us on board with his organization. And long story short, it turned out he was an infiltrator, and they were
Hmm.
feeding information that they wanted me to spread. They interviewed me with their Chinese channel, and we had like 100,000 views. And I told him about my book and the organization, but then he wanted me to help put him in contact with the lawyer friend that I had and various people. And they said they'd employ me in London as a journalist. They said they were being subsidized by a friend of Trump.
Uh-huh.
And
Okay.
looking back, I realized they were using me and other activists to glean information from us. But at the
Yeah.
same time, they were giving us information like a lot of the stuff that's coming out now with the e-files. I keep saying E because I don't want to give his name any power.
Yeah.
He was feeding me some of that information. It was so awful and so big, and again, my brain was just exploding with the stuff he was telling me about Clintons, these people, that people, and I was deep diving, and it was again very unhealthy for me mentally. It was too much.
Yes.
But then at that time, that's when my father became ill. So I slowly took a step back from the organization, the protests, the movement, and luckily from him and his organization, and especially when I realized what they
Yeah.
were actually trying to do, and I'd given them
Yeah.
so much of my personal information, which was ludicrous. Um, but
Mm.
yeah, so I took a step back from it all. And once my father had passed, I became very unwell, sort of mentally with it all, and didn't want to have any more doings with the organisations, just everything. I was just so burnt out by it all and depressed. And
Mm.
that I think was the following year, early the following year, that I decided I had to just get away. And that's when my off-grid adventures kind of
Yes.
began. When
Mm-hmm.
I went to
Mm-hmm.
a caravan in the mountains in the middle of winter, no electricity, no water, no nothing. I just turned up and yeah, but I was just so happy to be in peace and quiet in the mountains, going back to basics and try and ground myself again. And while I was up there, I started writing about my adventures and then other short stories. And that's when I brought out my third book the following year, Life's Too Short for Ironing, which is
Yes.
a
Yes. Yeah.
collection
Yeah.
that I'd written for years, short stories, my, I say, off-grid adventures. Then I was renovating an old caravan that I bought from a friend, lived on his land for a time, then various other pieces of land, a donkey sanctuary and another
Mm-hmm.
caravan. And it was then I also met my partner now online in 2023, towards the end of the year. He came over to see me at the donkey sanctuary,
Mm-hmm.
and then I went back to Denmark where he was living with him. He's Norwegian, was living in Denmark then. So it was a bit like that. And then finally he came to live here in Spain with me. We lived in a caravan on my mother's land. Then we went back up to the mountains where I'd been and lived in our big bell tent up there
Oh,
until
yes. I
finally
remember. Yeah.
we bought our own land in September of last year and began our other off-grid adventure,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is what we're in the midst of now. But
Yeah.
that was amazing.
I'm remembering the beautiful picture of your Beltane tent. I think in I think in book three. Doesn't matter which book, but I'm remembering the picture of that. So I do remember.
So this is your latest book. So that
Yep.
I'm in here at Skye Coelho, and on there's a small picture here of the tent, just
Ah,
for
that's
your.
it then. That's it then. Book four. Yeah, 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 yeah. Fabulous.
Yeah.
So if anybody wants to know, more about Zoe's story, right back through from book one through to the end of book four, she's written her continuing story through all the books, and they're absolutely fascinating. Yeah,
Yeah.
great. Thank you, Zoe. If I haven't said thank you enough, because I really appreciate you being in my books and all your wonderful adventures. I mean, it's very fascinating to think how you've been through all these different circumstances and how these people have appeared in your life, quite extraordinary, really. So
Yeah,
yeah,
kind of still here to tell the
yeah,
tale.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So how do you life now? You met Gabe, he's Norwegian. He finally came to live with you in Spain, so that was a very happy ending. And
Yeah.
what are you up to now? Oh, we're running out of time.